Welcome to the Irish Revolution. Last month we talked about an assassination attempt on the life of the Viceroy, who narrowly escaped. This month we're going to talk about the local council elections in 1920. We'll also look at the new IRA campaign against the larger consolidated police barracks. There was local municipal elections this month. Elections for rural districts would take place in the summer. In an attempt to weaken the Sinn Féin vote, the British introduced a new electoral system, proportional representation, or PR for short. Ireland still uses this system of the single transferable vote to this day, one of the few countries in the world to do so. The British hoped that this ranked choice system would give greater representation to smaller parties and thus dilute the Sinn Féin vote, as the British system of first past the post greatly rewards larger parties. In the case of the 1918 general election, the first past the post system granted Sinn Féin most of the seats in Ireland with a little under half the popular vote. Just as an aside, the Sinn Féin party almost certainly would have won a larger share of the popular vote if the Nationalist party had contested more seats in 1918. A great campaign of public education took place, spearheaded by the Proportional Representation Society and supported by the Sinn Féin party. 125,000 leaflets were handed out and they displayed slides in cinemas across the country. With a spoiled ballot rate of 3%, this public education campaign can be judged a success. PRSTV is a very complicated electoral system where you need to vote for candidates by ranked preference, and many people in Ireland today would struggle to explain how exactly the quota and redistribution of votes works exactly, and I'm not going to attempt to do so, as that would be exhausting for you and for me. But by and large it is an extremely fair voting system and produces broadly representative parliaments. With a turnout of almost 70% of the electorate in the contested districts, the results showed a much tighter contest than the 1918 election. Crucially, the Labour Party contested these elections on a radical economic programme, as well as being aligned with Sinn Féin on the national question. Sinn Féin came first with 560 seats nationwide, followed by Labour with 394. The role of left-wing politics is an often overlooked element of the revolution, and I covered this in a previous video, The People's Republic of Ireland, which you should see a link to there now. Unionists came third with 368 seats. This may surprise you, but they won only 302 of those seats in Ulster. They got 57 in Leinster, mostly in Dublin, 7 in Munster and 2 in Connacht. It would be a mistake to overlook the experience of the Southern Unionists during this period. The Nationalist Party, also known as the Irish Parliamentary Party, surprised many with 238 seats and outperformed Sinn Féin in Ulster, where it remained a powerful force. The results for the separatist Sinn Féin and Labour parties clearly demonstrated an ongoing resilience within Ireland among the people and an ongoing desire to press forward with the separatist cause. In Ulster, there was a political earthquake when the city of Derry became nationalist controlled for the first time. Also in Belfast, while the Unionists still maintained their majority, it was dramatically reduced. It's clear that the policy of ditching first past the post somewhat backfired for the British in Ulster, where the electoral system had long rewarded Unionist parties with outsized majorities. The election in rural districts later in June gave a much stronger mandate to Sinn Féin, and they won 80% of the vote nationwide on a joint ticket with the Irish Transport and General Workers Union. The vast majority of local councils swore allegiance to the revolutionary Parliament Dáil Éireann, which was a crippling blow to British authority in Ireland. Okay, let's have a look at some IRA attacks. As we've seen before, there was widespread attacks on RIC policemen across the country, leading to the closure of smaller outposts in the autumn of 1919 and the consolidation of police into larger, more sustainable barracks in larger towns and villages. There was an attack on a police barracks in Carrick-County, County Cork this month by Cork No. 1 Brigade, led by Mick Leahy. Explosives were used to tear down a wall and the garrison surrendered, and the IRA occupied it briefly. The impetus to attack barracks in general apparently came from general headquarters in Dublin, although there was a general feeling among Cork rebels that Cork had to make up for their failure to rise in 1916, and Thomas McCurtain, the Lord Mayor of Cork and commander of the Cork No. 1 Brigade, and Terence McSweeney, who later became Lord Mayor after his friend was murdered, proposed mass attacks on police barracks nationwide in late 1919, as did others such as Michael Brennan in County Clare. In fact, there was a general appetite for a second rising. McSweeney argued that they'd be able to hold out for months or 6 weeks, and then somewhere like Galway would rise up. This so-called travelling rising thesis was quickly shot down by General Headquarters, who rightly saw it as impractical and doomed to failure. Richard Mulcahy, Chief of Staff of the IRA and General Headquarters, rejected the Cork man's proposal and instead suggested that they select 3 barracks in the brigade area and strike them all on a single night. The attackers would then blend into normal life the next day as if nothing happened. In the end, one of the attacks failed and the other was called off at the last moment. Mulcahy was eager to prevent loss of life from either the attackers or the attacked and ordered the brigade to take all possible precautions to ensure that nobody died, an extremely odd precondition for an armed revolutionary movement. When Mulcahy reflected on these events years later, he recognised this as the transition of the conflict to war. Lord French, the Viceroy, also referred to these attacks as acts of war. But at the time, General Headquarters were still a little muddled and unsure about what direction they wanted to go in. At the time, they preferred the idea of small part-time outfits committed to regular actions such as this, as opposed to full-time units fighting guerrilla war, which is what would happen spontaneously later as the British stepped up their arrests of local rebels who were forced to go on the run and form full-time so-called flying columns. Just to wrap up before we go on to biographies, there was an RIC reprisal in Turles, County Tipperary this month, a dark premonition of what would come to pass in 1920 and 21 as the British state began to openly utilise a policy of state terror against the population. In Dublin, RIC Inspector Redmond, sent from Ulster to lead the rejuvenation of the Cripple G spy division, is assassinated by the squad under the direct orders of Michael Collins. I've done biographies on Richard Mulcahy, Michael Collins and Terence McSweeney in previous episodes, so this month I'm only going to focus on Tomás McCurtain. Tomás McCurtain was the Lord Mayor of Cork and was elected to that post in the local municipal elections in 1920. Like many of his generation, he joined the Fianna as a young man and then progressed to the Volunteers, which would later become the IRA. McCurtain led a large contingent of men in Cork during the Easter Rising, but due to the all-round confusion and poor organisation, it came to nothing. British forces surrounded the hall where the armed remnant of that original force remained, and the arms were handed over after negotiations without a shot fired. McCurtain was arrested and transferred to Frongoch Prison in Wales, the Republican University, where he also would have come into contact with Michael Collins, among others. After his release, he became a brigade commander and led the organisation of one of the most important IRA units during the war. In March 1920, he was murdered in his home in front of his wife and children by plainclothes RIC men concealed with face coverings. The nature of the murder led to huge outrage in Ireland. The subsequent inquest led to charges of willful murder against Prime Minister Lloyd George and members of the RIC. In retaliation, Michael Collins ordered his own personal squad of assassins to find and assassinate the RIC men responsible for the attack. RIC District Inspector Oswald Swansea was shot by the squad in Lisburn, County Antrim in 1920, which directly led to widespread violence and reprisals against that town's Catholic minority. Okay folks, thanks so much for watching. I'll talk to you all soon now. Good luck. Bye.